I was like, why would Patsy and John just meet this random lady out of the blue? Because of Susan. Judith is saying here, though, is that Patsy started to put JonBenet on display. She started to change the way that JonBenet dressed. She started to change the way that JonBenet looked intentionally. The Ramseys have cut off another friend, and it's going to be Judith Phillips. She is no longer our friend, so whatever she says, don't listen to her. If she says anything, she's lying. Once again, I want to thank everybody for watching and supporting and participating. If you remember maybe the past several videos, we've been talking a little bit about Judith Phillips, and really the overview is not anything really important about Judith, but it's more so about how the Ramseys treat their friends, how the Ramseys, what the Ramseys ask of their friends in terms of loyalty. And if you don't get with the program, then get out of my face. The Ramseys can isolate you in a minute. Just can. If you don't do what we tell you to do, like don't talk to the media or don't talk to the media the way we want, becomes a problem. Or don't pressure me to talk to the media, becomes a problem. We were talking about the sort of discrepancies between Patsy Ramsey and Judith Phillips, and how essentially Patsy was describing Judith Phillips as like a bad mom. So just to kind of get a recap on that. So essentially here in The Death of Innocence is kind of where Patsy just started kind of low-key shading Judith. Judith says Judith began traveling all over Colorado, leaving her family for days at a time to shoot. On one occasion, when my mother was in town, Judith begged to photograph us for a mother and daughter series she was putting together. She also took pictures of JonBenet and me, which gave her 2 generations of mothers and daughters. She had approached John about getting Access Graphics to sponsor their show, as she sent it on a self-initiated tour of Colorado. His company declined. Our pictures didn't make the cut for the traveling mother-daughter photo show Judith took throughout the state. And then she goes on to say, during my struggle with cancer and losing my hair, Judith frequently asked to take my picture. I tried to tell her that I was in the fight for my life, and having my bald head snapped by a camera wasn't high on my list of priorities. However, Judith persisted. So shortly after I finished my chemo, I had a little bit of hair, and so from there I wasn't as sensitive about my bald head, and so I went ahead and I said yes to stop Judith from continuing to ask me. So again, just to remind us what we're looking at here, we're looking at how Patsy frames one side of the story in relation to somebody else, like say Judith Phillips, how she frames it. So let's take a look at that. So thanks to the documentation of Candy Rose, no, rest in peace. Thanks to Candy Rose, she well documented this interview between Judith Smith and an individual by the name of Mary McCardle. I was looking on the internet trying to see if I couldn't find the video of this interview, but I couldn't. So I'll just kind of settle for this for now and kind of go on and talk about this. And there's a little bit of this interview here that Candy Rose documented by Rocky Mountain News that I'd like to touch a little bit on. Well, I guess I'll touch on it now. So before we kind of get rolling. So it says that Judith Phillips has spent much of the last year wondering why the Ramseys cut her off without a word. After 14 years of friendship that began when they lived in Atlanta and continued after they all moved to Boulder. It was devastating, Phillips said, of being told by another friend of the Ramseys that she no longer was considered their friend. To this day, I still don't know what I did. For Pam Griffin, and this is the part I want to get to. For Pam Griffin, a friend of Patsy Ramsey's, who designed many of JonBenet's pageant costumes, It has been a year of proving herself a true friend and loyal friend, but not without its cost. More specifically, Pam Griffin, I think, was on either the Geraldo Rivera show that we looked at, or she was on the Lisa Gibbons show that we looked at. Now, the Geraldo Rivera interview or talk show, it's out there on the internet. It's hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for. But that's out there on the internet. It's not on YouTube, but it's on the internet. The Lisa Gibbons, I think that is archived on YouTube by, I can't remember the name of the YouTube. It's like the Ramsey archives or something like that. As far as I'm aware of, it's like a sort of like a violet colored, maroon colored logo, but it's the Ramsey archives or something like that. And the Lisa Gibbons interviews are in there. I think Pam Griffin is in there. But also too, there's a picture of Patsy coming out of the church, I think in Boulder, Colorado, when Patsy and John had, gone to church, and I think they were trying to do some sort of PR photo op, or it wasn't a PR photo op. It was like what they said was they were trying to just, I don't really know what they were trying to do, but they were trying to bring awareness, I think, of some sort, trying to bring some sort of awareness to the situation. But anyways, the picture that you see of John and Patsy walking out with somebody, and you have Burke in the front, that is going to be, I think, Pam Griffin kind of holding her and comforting her and stuff like that. So, and just to be thorough, more specifically, I mean, these pictures. So, you have Patsy here. You obviously have Burke here. Burke was heavily criticized for it. It seems like a smirk on his face is what it. And I didn't point this out. I saw it, but I didn't point it out because sometimes I do try to refrain from being nitpicky. However, others pointed it out. So this is Pam Griffin, I believe. Could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do not mind being wrong. But anyways, I think this is Pam Griffin. Once again, I think coming from the same place, Patsy, Pam Griffin. And then once again, same idea, Patsy, John kind of smirking a little bit, probably just some pleasantries to this gentleman right here. You have, Patsy and then Burke and then Pam kind of sitting right there. So these pictures are available on the internet. I simply just searched Burke smiling and then kind of scrolled down and saw these. It's funny that Google associated these pictures with Burke smiling. So anyways, let's continue. So this is kind of this loyalty that individuals are taking or having to uphold in their pledge to Patsy and John, kind of taking a toll on them. For Pam Griffin, a friend of Patsy Ramsey's who designed many of JonBenet's pageant costumes, it has been a year of proving herself as a true friend. This has taken from me a vulnerability that I had hoped never to lose, said Griffin, who has often found herself as Patsy's lone defender on television talk shows. A person who always greeted others with a hug, Griffin now tends to keep her distance. Trust takes time. Now I just don't feel comfortable around a lot of people, and I always felt comfortable around everybody, she said. I resent the tabloid media taking from me the right to be vulnerable. Okay. Okay. I resent the tabloid media from taking from me the right to be vulnerable. If that's what I choose to do, that was something I hoped to keep all my life. Okay. The endless video loop of JonBenet in pageants decked out in elaborate costumes designed by Griffin has bought her some new clients, although she lost more than $30,000 in business from customers who disapproved of her Geraldo appearance. Okay, so it's on the Geraldo show. But despite the seemingly universal criticism of kitty pageantry, the Colorado pageant circuit is booming, thanks in part to JonBenet. So it's their fault. So anyways, getting back to Judith. So we have this indication that Judith is a terrible mom, and maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. We have this indication that Judith is a terrible mom, and okay, it's down here. She's leaving her kids all the time, days at a time, to go pursue her dream, is what Patsy is telling us. However, in this interview, this gives us a little bit more about who Judith Phillips really is, because how Patsy describes it is she tailors it to how she perceives Judith Phillips. She tailors her experience to how she perceives Judith Phillips. And so you remember, okay, I'll just read this and then I'll talk about that. Judith Phillips grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, the daughter of a music professor. So already there, I'm thinking that there is some sort of propensity toward creativity and art. And a bank executive, along with her older brother and sister, Joel and Mary, and her identical twin sister, Jane. Her father's work at Concordia University caused Judith to be exposed to works of artists across the disciplines from Ernest Hemingway. And this is what I knew, her father's work. Apparently the father was the musician. And this is what I knew. When I saw that, then her father's work is going to open her up to all this creativity and this artistic stuff. From Ernest Hemingway to Frank Lloyd Wright and Stan Kenton, leaving her with a lifelong impression of the impact of art on the human spirit. Of course, we clearly see now that Judith actually loves art. She actually has a background in art. It's not like she's playing coy, right? I'm really not a photographer, and or I'm kind of getting into art, or she's really about this. I've really been doing this. It almost gives you the sense that either Patsy doesn't know Judith like that, like she claims. Judith thought she was in a friendship with Patsy, and really Patsy didn't really respect her friends like that. And so Judith was disposable and didn't know it. Judith was annoying in some sort, and Patsy just didn't say it to her. Like, how you come across people and you think that y'all hit it off, but really one person is thinking something about you that, and once you find out, they're like, oh, I never really liked you. And you're like, what? This is news to me. What do you mean? I'm like, no, man, I never really liked you. I just don't like the way you move. You never said anything about that to me. That's crazy. Look, you can do what you want to do. You can carry on your friendships and your relationships, how you carry them on. I don't like doing that. I don't like doing that. If you don't like them and you don't know how to get away from them, just don't go around them. That's all I'm saying. So, anyways, impact of art on the human spirit. Judith Phillips graduated with a degree in art history and elementary education from Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. Art history. So she's already there. I'm already in art. Like that, I've been doing this. My dad put this in me. That's what I've been doing. And so even before she met Patsy, she already had a propensity toward art, right? That's bred in her. Immediately out of college, she found work outside of her hometown of Chicago as a second grade teacher, because elementary education. After several years, she left teaching to use her natural people, math, and science skills to work in radio and then teach adults in the computer industry. Okay, so I'm teaching a little bit in computer industry. That's probably how she met her husband, right? Eventually, she married and settled down in Atlanta, Georgia, to bring into the world her son, Matthew, and daughter, Lindsay. For the next decade, she became and lived the images she now captures on film as a mother to her two children. In 1989, Judith Phillips arrived in Boulder, Colorado. The creative energy of her children only enhanced her own desire to express her native creativity and her love of art since childhood. She needed to move beyond her roles as a wife and mother to reconnect with herself as an individual. This sentence as I understand it, happens to women all the time. I saw on the internet the other day, this mom was kind of saying, I lost my spark when I became a mom. She got heavily criticized for saying that. What she wasn't trying to say, she wasn't trying to say that I don't like my children. She wasn't trying to say that. What she was trying to say was the person, the fun, jovial, happy person that I was, that I knew myself to be before my children, I no longer am that. I would have watched this video or this movie, or I would have gone out and done this, or I would have thought this was fun. I would have traveled to, South Korea, or I would have traveled to Bali, or I would have, done this and this and this. But when I had my kids, I no longer did that. Like every single time I think about doing something, I can't do it because I have my kids and I got to be a responsible mom. It completely changed her. And she's not saying I would trade my kids or my kids are stopping me from having fun. It's just saying it's hard for me to find out who I am as a mom or as a person because my motherhood has taken over so much, and me being a wife has taken over. So I am so consumed with the duties of a mother and a wife that I can no longer be myself. Just something as simple as sitting in the tub, drinking some wine, maybe eating some grapes, listening to music with some candles on. I can't do that anymore because my husband might come in and say, hey, babe, we need to do this. Or my kids might be banging on the door outside, or my kids might be outside beating each other up. And so I can't be a mom anymore, right? I have to now tend to my kids, right? Or tend to my husband. And so before I got married, before I had kids, I had this love for art that my dad taught me. And I want to get back to that, is essentially what Judith Phillips is saying. So how Patsy views Judith as, you're going off and leaving your kids. And Judith is saying, no, there's the time that I just really poured into my kids, and I'm still pouring into my kids. There's a time that I poured into my marriage, and I'm still pouring into my marriage. However, I want to get back to the thing that makes me, that kind of gives me a spark every day, that excites me and gives me a fire to be alive every day. I want to get back to that. And that is the story that Patsy extracted and pulled out and did not tell us in The Death of Innocence, the way she wrote it. She wrote it as if Judith was following her around, chasing her down, trying to be her. And Judith was like, wait. I'm my own person. I don't need anyone. I like you as a friend, but I'm not out here begging for your friendship. You know what I mean? Like, I came over here to say what's up. You didn't want to see me. I didn't fall in line because I'm an independent thinker, and I don't fall in line with people like you guys. And so I'm an independent thinker, and you know what? But I also have a heart. I'm also a mom. So there are things that I do because that's just what I want to do. That's who I am. But I also have compassion to say, she's not a bad mom. Even after being called a bad mom, Judith was like, I think she loved her kids. I don't think she did anything crazy to her kids. I've never seen any issues of abuse. Judith could have been petty. She could have been like, who knows what they do? She could have said something like that, but she didn't. And so she's saying, I'm trying to reconnect with myself. So when she picked up a camera and found herself capturing the souls of those she photographed on film, she arrived as Judith Phillips, the photographer and fine artist. Her early work won contests and awards won contests and awards as publications sought her out for photo assignments in the Boulder, Denver, and Colorado areas. So Patsy made it seem like Judith was chasing opportunities when in fact opportunities were chasing Judith. Patsy couldn't fathom that maybe Judith was actually so good that people could actually like and want her work. What's disrespectful? Now that I think about it, Patsy told Judith maybe she should take some classes. The girl has a degree in art. Patsy, you have a degree in journalism. What do you know about art? If anybody needs to be telling anyone to take some classes, Judith needs to be telling Patsy take some classes. Because Patsy, you got a degree in journalism, and if we going off of that, then we assume that you don't have any extensive training in art. You may, but we can assume that if we're being prejudiced, then we can assume that and say, well, maybe you need to take some art classes and learn how to paint. I mean, if we being petty like that. But Judith wasn't being petty like that. She didn't even say anything. And so in 89, she arrives in Boulder, Colorado, and she reestablishes herself. She knows how to get out there and hustle. She reestablishes herself. And this point is crucial. After the death of her father in 96, Judith felt compelled to organize her portraits into an exhibition to share with the world. And as the success of Motherhood 2000 greets the world, she has begun work on her fatherhood series entitled The Leader of the Band. So basically, Judith has been doing this. I've been organizing stuff without your help. I've been entering stuff without your help. I don't need you. So it's kind of condescending a little bit for you to like recommend, you know what I mean? Like for you to recommend stuff to me. It's like you don't even know me. So people got to get to know you, but you don't got to get to know people. Okay, got it. Judith Phillips has lived as a mother, a housewife, teacher, and artist. She has worked in numerous community and political projects protecting the safety of women and children, parental rights for fathers, asthma research and hurricane victims in Honduras. She hails from the city of big shoulders, as Carl Sandburg wrote in his poem, Chicago. And she volunteers to shoulder her responsibilities both as an artist and as a citizen. Her unique life experience and a multitude of interests, responsibilities, and professions has opened her vision to the loves, hurts, desires, and souls of the everyday people she photographs. Through those photographs, we all gain access to the artist's understanding of the truth she sees. A local newspaper in Boulder, Colorado, caught up with Judith Phillips in 95 before her motherhood images had hung at Chautauqua Park. And her frame. So I think this motherhood thing was the one that Patsy was talking about. That was going to go in Chautauqua, was going to go in her collection. So apparently we see from the other side, she organized it and got it going and hung it up in Chautauqua Park. Now, Chautauqua Park is where the Ramseys live. That's where the Ramseys live. That's 755 Boulder, 14th, 755, 15th. That's where their house is. And her fame as fame as an artist had only begun to emerge from the layers of other artists in the intellectually and creatively progressive Boulder community. Judith Phillips said to the reporter, "I have hopes of being a global photographer. I'd like other countries to see a different kind of American woman than who they see on the reruns of Bewitched, or Madonna, who cones over her breasts. We have hearts and souls just like they do." With the launching of the Motherhood 2000 World Tour, this artist brings her heart and soul to the world. That's what I said. That's what I said in our other analysis. Judith Phillips has no problem, and she wants to become sort of this global photographer, this big photographer. And that's what I'm saying. That's all she's trying to do. She's not trying to follow after Patsy or follow. See, and this is what I'm saying. This is kind of the small mindset of Patsy here coming through. You think that you are the center of the world and people want to stay behind you in small Boulder, Colorado. No disrespect to Boulder. You think people want to follow you to Atlanta. No, I want to go out and do my own thing. You can keep your minions to follow you elsewhere, but I don't want to do that. And that's the difference between Judith and Patsy. Judith always saw Patsy as an equal. And, she's over there doing her thing. We don't do the same things, but she's over there doing her thing. I still support her. We may see things differently. We might get in these kind of light arguments to where, Patsy might say, oh, it's supposed to be this way. And Judith might respond, I kind of see it differently. And, they kind of get in their little light verbal scuffle. And then, they kind of leave and say, well, girl, I love you. And I'm going to go on about my business. And that's kind of where it goes. However, for Patsy, she kind of always held on to that. This girl doesn't know what she's doing. She's silly. She doesn't make sense. She's lost. What kind of a mom does this and that? So we move on to this part, another part of the interview. Now, when you go to a Candy Rose /S Judith Phillips, you can find this interview, and you can read through much more if you want to kind of get a handle on this whole Judith Phillips thing or anything else. And so essentially I want to get here. So she had a bob is what the reporter is asking. She had a bob, and Judith Phillips says, a real short one, talking about JonBenet. She said she had a real short one. And I said to Patsy, what happened to her hair? And she goes, oh, I just got so sick of fighting with JonBenet about combing her hair. We would fight all the time. So I just got sick of it. And I took the scissors and cut her hair. And so she kind of laughed. And then the reporter's like, oh, she cut it herself. And Judith Phillips was like, yeah. So she asked, how old was she? About 3? And then Judith Phillips responds, yeah, she was about 3. And shortly afterward, I did the photo shoot for the Colorado Women's News article and spent some time in the home. And JonBenet still had that short bob of a haircut. She reminded me of a little girl who had some tomboy qualities to her. As I searched around the house for a lighting situation of where I was going to take these pictures of Patsy and then the children, she would follow secretly behind. I would hear some noise and I'd turn around and there was JonBenet. And it says, but at that point, at 3, she could still be a child. JP says, yeah. Judith Phillips says, yeah, she was dressed like in very childlike clothes. She and my daughter played up in her bedroom. In fact, my daughter later told me that during one of her visits, that during this time that she went up to JonBenet's room and JonBenet showed her all of her trophies from all her pageants, her ribbons and stuff like that. And my daughter said, what are these? And she said, oh, my mom just wants me to get to these pageants. And these are our trophies that I earned. And my daughter said, wow, cool. She said, JonBenet, but the trophies really don't belong here. They belong in my mom's room. Yeah. So reporter responds, and that was when she was older. And Judith Phillips says, yeah. And then, the hair dye, it was the summer of, I think it was 95. She came back. Patsy came back. I saw her early after they had returned, hadn't seen JonBenet, but she had arranged a meeting with me and another woman who wanted to meet Patsy to, I think, get some money from Access Graphics for a fundraiser. So I think, so I kind of put the two of them together. And really, the two of them did a lot of talking, but that's the luncheon where I noticed that Patsy had this humongous diamond ring. And I looked and I said, oh, my God, Patsy, where did you get that? And she said that she had got it in Texas. You know how it is, where they had stayed in Texas in the summer for a short time. And she saw all these Texas women with their big rocks. Yep. Yep. They're big rocks, and she wanted one too, laughing. So it's the biggest thing I've ever seen, and that one symbol of that big rock told me that there was something different I felt. So she asked, were you shocked? Obviously, when you saw the bleach blonde hair, yeah. And so JP responds, I was shocked. That's why I asked Patsy, what did you do to JonBenet's hair? You didn't dye it, did you? And so she responds, no. It was the hot summer. How stupid do you think people are? It was the hot summer sun in Charlevoix that dyed her. What? You know what? I don't know how true that is. I've never dyed my hair. I've never watched people dye their hair. I don't know how that process works. I have no comment on that. And the reporter says, and it was obviously bleached. And Judith Phillips laughing says, yes, it was obviously bleached. It was obviously bleached. I thought, how stupid do you think I am? I didn't respond, but I said, oh, that's interesting. Now, let me pause here. I got to pause here because One of the reasons that I read interviews like this, and sometimes I like to double check them. I like to make sure that they're kind of, I don't want to say real, but I want to make sure that there are people. If somebody's going to say something, I want it to be backed up in some way, shape, or form. And so I want to pause here to kind of show some of the pictures, and then that are in question, the terrible pictures that are in question. And I also want to pause here to kind of show a little bit about the confirmation from the other side. So, let's see here. Obviously, talking about, as we talked about, just as a refresher, Judith Phillips showing up to and I think this was talked about in The Death of Innocence, Judith Phillips showing up to the Ramseys' house after 3 months of JonBenet being dead. And as the Vanity Fair article points out, and as The Death of Innocence points out, Judith and Patsy met through mail software company. And so essentially this is interesting because, as Judith Phillips is saying, hey man, I started kind of getting into some teaching adults in the computer industry. My husband, and I met my husband does that, right? So I would be tapped into that. And so that would be something, because you remember we said in our analysis, I think of, in another analysis we did with Judith Phillips, Patsy was saying we had nothing in common. Our families had nothing in common, so we just kind of went our separate ways. That's weird. I can count a couple things that y'all have in common. First of all, your mothers, right? Second of all, you both came from Atlanta, right? Third of all, you both have 2 kids, right? Your daughters are the same age, right? Fourth, both of your husbands are in the technology industry, right? Fifth, you both went into technology with your husbands and kind of helped your husbands in their technology businesses. Those are 5 things. Y'all have nothing to talk about? Bruh, y'all have plenty to talk about. Y'all have plenty in common. So for Patsy to be like, oh, we really had nothing in common, so we just kind of went our separate ways, that is a lie. I think I'm going to have to call cap on that, because I feel like you're trying to shade Judith and make it seem like, yo, I don't really know. I mean, she didn't have anything to say to me. That's really weird. You're trying to downplay the relationship, and there's no need. There's no need. And that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why the Ramseys do this. There is no need to downplay this relationship. It's really not. If you guys are friends, you guys are friends. We were friends. Something went left. That's it. That's all you got to say. You don't have to lie and say like, oh, we were never really friends. Come on. Don't do that. And so, this whole thing about appearing on the Talk for Pay circuit and stuff like that, so on and so forth, blah, 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 as we talked about before. But I want to understand a little bit more about this portion, so we can just kind of re-explain. Not going to go crazy. But, she begged me. Judith begged Patsy. I was trying to fend her off. And get her off me. But she begged me to do this. And so I ended up doing it. And so here are the pictures that are in question that we have. So the one specifically about the bob is here. Might be a little grainy, but the one specifically about the bob and Patsy's hair being like an inch, JonBenet having like this short cut, this is the one I think she's talking about, right? And then we can X that out and go to the next one. Now, these are and I think this is also the one, I think one of the ones where JonBenet had the bob, but here we have Burke, and then we have Patsy still with the inch of hair, is feeling a little bit more confident, feeling a little bit more comfortable, right? So that's kind of around that same time, I would have to think. But then these pictures, you have, I think this picture was kind of taken as the part of the Generations photo shoot, I think. I think it may have been. And then you have Patsy and JonBenet here. I think this was definitely what she was going to use for the motherhood. I think that in Chautauqua Park, she's going to use that as part of that. But I guess ultimately decided not to. And honestly, you know, Patsy is so proud. I'll just say it like that. Patsy is so proud that it's like, even though you might take my picture of something, take a picture of me on something I really don't care about, then I still want it out there because I still feel like I'm the best of the best. Does that make sense? I still feel that I'm the best. And if you're going to put a picture out there for this little art exhibit, I don't even know why Patsy wouldn't even ask to come to the art exhibit or request and say, "Oh, girl, that's so dope. I want to be there." I don't know why Patsy wouldn't go. It seems to me that this is more of an issue with Patsy being real friends to people rather than people being real friends to Patsy again. So this seems like a little bit of fakeness and shadiness in Patsy. Not trying to disrespect her at all. I'm just saying, why are you not asking to attend? If you're getting pictures taken, why are you not asking to attend this event, regardless or not of whether your picture will be in the exhibit? You guys are upper class. You guys enjoy the finer things. You guys enjoy. You're an artist. You paint. Why wouldn't you want to go see this stuff and be like, "Girl, I want to see how it worked out"? You know what I mean? Because clearly other people respect her. She's made a name for herself in Boulder. So clearly other people, she's not just some small town photographer like they know her. Denver, Boulder, people know me. You know what I mean? So she's clearly gotten out and done the work. You see what I'm saying? So this is a picture of JonBenet and Burke, I think under the same kind of, within the same photo shoot. Not bad pictures. I've heard people call them creepy, but at the end of the day, like, I feel like these are good pictures. And obviously, you know, you have Nidra, you have Patsy. It kind of makes me wonder just how short Nidra was, because if Patsy is 5'4", maybe they have on heels, but if Patsy is 5'4", Burke is probably about 4'9" at this point. But Patsy's probably wearing heels and Burke is probably wearing flats. JonBenet is 3'9" at this point. But this hand that JonBenet is making, it reminds me of that other picture that she did, where she was kind of doing the same kind of pose, where she was kind of like doing this. And it really brings out the kind of the color in her eyes, and it's like a it's like a green background. And so anyways, these are the pictures that Judith is taking. I think that's the last. No, I think this is the last one. And so just with the, you know, with the grandmother and, you know, the granddaughter. And so some really good pictures of JonBenet, honestly. So these are the pictures that are in question, right? So moving on. The other point that I wanted to get to was the comment about being a tomboy. We can confirm that with John, because I remember him saying that. I was like, yeah, I remember him saying something about JonBenet wanting to hang out with Burke's friends. And I ran into something that like kind of threw me for a loop. John Ramsey here explicitly states that, you know, JonBenet is a tomboy in The Other Side of Suffering. How could I deny my girls their fun? The media and tabloids made it seem as though JonBenet did nothing but pageants. They called her a little beauty queen. How little they knew. JonBenet was also a tomboy. She loved gymnastics and art, skating, playing in the park, hiking with dad and mom. playing with her brother, making crafts, and school, life in general, held millions of interests for this child. And Patsy, I think, mentioned, um, her taking, I think, piano lessons more specifically. And at some point in time, let me see if I can find it. At some point in time, and I think it's in one of the interviews, yeah, every once in a while, okay, what kind of things did JonBenet like to do? What kind of games did she like to play? Patsy said, so she likes crafts mostly, like making stuff, painting. She liked painting, watching movies, and dressing up in makeup and dancing, tap dancing, singing. She got bent on taking violin one time, tried to talk her out of it, but she just insisted. So we got a little violin about so big. And then she took that for a while, and then she decided that she didn't want to do that anymore. And so they asked her, did she take any craft classes? And, Patsy said, I don't really remember any of that. But this is the part that kind of threw me for a loop. They talk about in the interview on 97, they talk about she and Burke played with the Kobe kids. Kobe kids were from down the street and stuff like that. And I think it was something like that I remember reading. But it goes on to say, let me see here. It goes on to say that, yeah, they were all, yeah. Let me pull this up. Okay, did Burke and JonBenet play together during that time? And this is where I read it, talking about, kids from being from up the street. Oh, so I guess this was on Christmas Day. I didn't think it was on Christmas Day. I guess it was on Christmas Day. Oh. I didn't know this was on Christmas Day. So John got up and he got into his pajamas. Okay, I just want to make sure. So they got up. Let's start on the 25th. So this is actually. Okay, are you aware that John had some sort of infidelity according to Lucinda? No. Okay, so you certainly wouldn't know this woman's name then. No. John, or Patsy, you don't know? What's your response? She's an some woman in Tucson, saying that she's an extortionist. We've kind of talked about that before. And they kind of brought it to Patsy and said, are you aware this woman had an affair with John that Lucinda said, ultimately causing the dissolution of the marriage? Patsy said, no, I'm not aware of anything like that. Are you aware of prior to today? Because I had to ask Nidra, Pam, and Polly and if they are aware of this person while we were in Georgia, so we could find her and make sure she's not some sort of kook that laid in wait for 20 years. And so Patsy goes to answer. Steve Thomas says, today is the first time you've been made aware of this woman. Patsy says, I don't know this woman. And so John didn't tell her of any infidelity. So they move on to the Christmas thing. We get up at about six-ish, probably. I don't think that's true. I think they got up at 6:30. Okay, so Patsy, take me through the first 3 hours of Christmas morning with you and John and Burke and JonBenet, kind of minute by minute, step by step. Thank you for doing that, because they act like they can't give you a breakdown. Well, we went downstairs and passed out Christmas presents. That's not a step by step. About how long did it take you to pass out Christmas presents? I know you talked about you did it kind of slowly. Yeah. Right. About how long did that take? I don't know, maybe an hour or so. Okay. I mean, to pass them out and opening them, I try to get everybody to take turns, Of course, their piles are bigger than my pile. So they open two or three and then I open one. Okay. Just, because I take so long to open mine. So, and they kind of say, you want to savor every little moment. So Patsy says, right. What was John wearing when he came downstairs that day? What was he wearing? Oh, he was in his pajamas and his robe, probably. Okay, and what were you wearing? Oh, pajamas and robe. Didn't get cleaned up or showered or anything like that. No. Kids won't let you do that. Fair enough. Alrighty. What were the... Now, I'm not going to make a statement in terms of, the cleanliness of Patsy Ramsey. That's not what I'm here to do. But it does seem to show some sort of consistency with them or with Patsy. The day before on Christmas morning, it almost seems like a mirror, right, of what they did on the morning of the 26th. We woke up early, about 6, put the same clothes on. Burke says I got up later. I got up later. I would wait till my parents would go to sleep, and I got up at about 12:30 to go down the stairs and see the presents, and JonBenet came with me. Burke said that on Dr. Phil's show. So then we have two things that are the same. And then on the 26th, and so that would be Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. Let's call it Christmas morning, technically. In my household, we might still call it nighttime, even though it's past midnight. We still might call it nighttime, and we don't call it morning till the next day. So So Christmas Eve, early morning, Christmas Day, Burke is waking up in the morning time with JonBenet early in the morning after the parents have gone to sleep. And then on the 20th, and then they rush into the parents' room, jump on him and say, it's early, let's get up and go open presents. Patsy and John get up and put on the same clothes. And then the next day, the 26th, the story is the same. Patsy gets up, puts on the same clothes. But Burke has already told you that he waited for his parents to go to sleep, and then he got up and went back downstairs. I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that JonBenet got up and followed him, because I believe JonBenet was always following him. Judith Phillips just told you JonBenet was interested in stuff. She followed me. Patsy Ramsey will admit to that. She admitted to that in the JonBenet American. I didn't show this clip, but she admitted to that in Michael Tracy's, and you can find it online. Michael Tracy's, and I think it's in a Reddit forum, and it's on Vimeo. But Michael Tracy's JonBenet's America. It's about 51 minutes, and so if you just type in Michael Tracy JonBenet's America, you should be able to find it in a Reddit forum, something like that, or on Vimeo. And Vimeo is Vimeo. So just in case you're not familiar with the website, I don't go in there often, but every now and again. But essentially, Patsy was saying that JonBenet was so curious that when Patsy was sick with cancer, JonBenet came in the room, and she'd be kind of on the bag of blood that Patsy had or something like that. JonBenet was filling on the bag, and she was interested in tracing up the line all the way up, Patsy in the patchy shirt and saying, where's this going? And John was sitting on the side, kind of as Patsy was recounting the story. John was sitting on the side, just kind of laughing, that was an honest laugh. John was honestly, and so Patsy was honestly retelling the story, and JonBenet and John was honestly appreciating the story. And so we know on two occasions, JonBenet has a propensity to follow people, to follow around people. Sometimes JonBenet, you could get up. I had this idea that you could get up and walk very quietly and think that JonBenet was asleep, but then JonBenet waits till you get up and you walk down, and then JonBenet could pop up and come behind you, is what I believe. JonBenet could get up and pop up behind you, and you turn off. Oh, JonBenet, why are you behind me? You know what I mean? And it just kind of scares you. It partly scares you, and it's partly like, why are you following me? Kind of deal. So this part right here just kind of, so what kind of pajamas does Burke wear? So on and so forth. Do you remember what he was wearing? Blah, blah, blah. What and kind of going to this Christmas Day, because I was trying to figure out what they did on in the interim after Christmas presents and everything, what they do in the interim. And so I was, trying to get clothes ready to go different places. I remember that. Probably go, to Fleet White's house later on. And then a bunch of kids started showing up to, they want to see each other. And, Burke set up his Nintendo 64. And during the early morning hours, before the kids got there, did everybody get dressed? I take it. And then Patsy says at some point, yeah, we all got dressed in the early morning hours. And so they asked, did everybody take showers and baths and stuff like that, get clean for the day? And Patsy says, I don't remember. I doubt if the kids did. I don't remember. What were you doing that you don't know whether or not your kids took baths? I'm not saying Patsy is a bad mother. What I am wondering is, why don't you know what your kids were doing? This would seem to me like you are the type of mom to say, their kids, they can do whatever they want. This is their home. They know where their toys are. They know where to play. Go play with your toys. So that it does open up a space where the kids could wander off in the house and get lost in the house and just go do whatever. I don't know if they took a shower. I don't care. But I do know that they can get lost, and anything could happen in a 4-story house. Kids could be playing well together, or things could pop off. If you are upstairs and you cannot hear things popping off, that could be a problem. So that's all I'm saying. It has nothing to do with her hygiene. It has everything to do with your availability to know what might happen with your kids. And so it seems like the house is very casual, right? There's sort of like a looseness to the house where these kids can go and come as they please. They can do whatever they want. We press them a little bit to get them to go in the right direction, but they don't always have to listen to us. There are times where I just kind of get upset and I say, you know what, JonBenet, I'm going to cut your hair. I'm going to do it myself, whatever. We have these fake mom-daughter fights. So it says, okay, kids start coming over to the house during the day. About what time did John go down to the hangar to check on the plane? I don't know. Lunchtime after lunch. So did you have lunch that day? I'm sure we did. Okay, do you have any idea what did you have for lunch? She said, I don't remember. About how long was John gone to check on the plane? Okay, probably a couple of hours. So he left about afternoon sometime, gone till 3 in the afternoon. So what we know now is that John, from what Patsy is saying, they had lunch probably somewhere around 11 to somewhere between 11 and 12. John was able to get up and leave and go down to the hangar at 12. And he stayed there till 3 o'clock. Now, they had to be at the Whites for 4:30. So John had to come home. He's out there dealing with that plane, making sure it's fueled up, oiled up, and stuff like that, has oil in it and stuff like that. Because when I took my flight, my practice flight, discovery flight with the guy was telling me, he said, man, these things burnt oil like crazy. I said, okay, cool. So he was probably doing all that, making sure it was in checking everything and making sure the wheels were good and everything. And so, and doing all of that. So he's gone till about 3. Okay. And there were kids over at the house playing the whole time while John was gone. JonBenet and Burke. And so Patsy says, the better part of the day, I would say, kids were over. Okay, who all was over there between 12 and 3? Evan, Kai, and these new little kids from up the street. I don't know their names. So they ask, are they little boys or little girls? 2 little boys. And Patsy says, I think it's 2 little girls. One girl was kind of foreign looking, sort of, she might be adopted or something like that. The other little girl, I can almost remember her name. Sort of starts with that, like an M or something like that. And so they're playing around, and they asked, did Burke and JonBenet play together during that time? Did the little girls and little boys mix up at all? And so Patsy says, yeah, they play. So asked, did they play together? And so Patsy says, yeah, they were all, yeah. A lot of them were in Burke's room playing that Nintendo. And I remember coming up there and checking on them, and so JonBenet is 6 at this time. JonBenet is coming up there and checking on them, and the boys were mostly sitting around playing the Nintendo, and she had this little jewelry making kit right there in the doorway of Burke's room. They're making. Okay, so I made a couple with her. Okay, during the time that John was gone, was that when you were wrapping gifts and trying to get suitcases packed? And Patsy said, stuff ready, right? Yeah, I was trying to get stuff ready while John was gone. This part strikes me because not only was JonBenet following Burke around, but she wanted to know what he was doing all the time. All the time. As we pointed out, I think if you go look at the Radar Online trek through the house, when they did the walkthrough in the house, when they did the walkthrough of the crime scene, there's 2 videos. In one of the videos, you will see that when they went through JonBenet's room, there was an old Nintendo sitting on the ground, an NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System. There was an old one on the ground. I think the first one before the Super Nintendo. The old Nintendo was on the ground in JonBenet's room. I said, this seems to indicate that whatever Burke did, JonBenet wanted to do. So if Burke learned how to play video games, JonBenet may have wanted to learn how to play video games as well. If Burke was doing kind of boy things, JonBenet may have wanted to learn how to do boy things as well. And it could have become so stifling that it got annoying, right? And so JonBenet is kind of walking around annoying Burke by the fact that Burke is in the room with the door closed, hanging out with his friends. And so JonBenet comes out there, and I didn't see this part. JonBenet comes up there, and she's checking on what the boys are doing. John says this because this is what Judith Phillips is. Judith Phillips is like, yeah, JonBenet was kind of like a tomboy. And John and Patsy are coming back and telling you, yes, JonBenet was like a tomboy. So the point that I'm making is that it's not like Judith Phillips is just out here talking recklessly just to be talking. Some of the stuff that Judith Phillips says, you guys back up. So Judith is like, no. I legit. And as she says in her letter, I legit had a relationship with the Ramseys. I don't know what Patsy is talking about, but our kids played together. They act like we don't know each other and we never had anything in common. No, our kids played together. My daughter, while Patsy is saying we didn't really know him, we didn't really hang out with him, Judith Phillips is like, no, my daughter knew JonBenet so well that it affected her for 3 months after. Now, if we look at the timeline, when JonBenet died, and then she shows up 3 months after to talk to Patsy, could that have been why part of the reason Judith came over to talk to Patsy, right? I'm consoling my daughter, and now I'm coming over and I might, yes, I want to talk to you about the pictures, but I also want to run by you and say, hey man, condolences to you. My daughter is broken up. I've spent the last 3 months consoling my daughter. My daughter is, she's just, it's hard. It's been hard for her, you know, and from the bottom of my heart, from my family to yours, I just want to say sorry. That could have been why Judith Phillips, part of the reason why Judith Phillips was coming over, besides the pictures. And so from what we can see is that, yes, JonBenet was following Burke around. Yes, JonBenet may have put herself in a position, because I'm trying to understand why. Why would somebody do something like that to her? JonBenet may have put herself, and unknowingly put herself in a position to where she was just too annoying, overly annoying. So annoying that, so stifling to me that I have to break loose in some way, shape, or form. That could be the case. That's what I wanted to know. So let's get back to Susan. Or not Susan, Judith. So they're talking about, this is like the second time we've heard about, Vanity Fair reported, and Louise Bardock reported that, you know, they were dyeing JonBenet's hair. And so Judith is coming out and saying, yeah, you know, they were dyeing her hair. Patsy is lying about it and saying that the son did it, you know. And so Judith Phillips says, of course, I saw the physical changes with her hair, and that she was dressed up like at her Christmas party. She was dressed in the Cinderella ball gown. I had never seen her in clothes like that. You know, I hadn't seen that before. And she was so perfectly coiffed, you know, makeup. And when I did the photo shoot in the studio, the one where she and her mom and Burke and Nidra were there, I saw her really, I left it up to the people to decide how they wanted to present their family. I didn't say you had to wear these kinds of clothes. And so I was always very interested to see what mothers would bring to wear. And so basically, this is Patsy. Like, Patsy made it seem like Judith was beating her door down for these mother-daughter family pictures. And Judith is like, nah, man, we had a conversation, and they actually got into it, and they picked what they wanted to do. So truth be told, Patsy had a hand in this. Patsy had control. Patsy had more control of this situation than she's willing to let up on and give. She just made it seem like Judith bombarded me, and I just had to take it, and she just overwhelmed me with requests, and you know, I just, please, Judith, stop, don't, please stop, you know, and just to get her off of me. It's like, come on. Okay, so JP laughs. So when I saw these elegant outfits, I was and Patsy did the house the same way. You know, she spent $700,000 on the house. So, I mean, these outfits are not out of the ordinary. And the Cinderella ball gown, when they were talking about JonBenet being on display at Pasta J's, the Cinderella ball gown, I mean, that doesn't make it it doesn't help your case at all to know that you have JonBenet on display. And essentially what Judith is saying here, though, is that Patsy started to put JonBenet on display at some point in time. She started to put JonBenet on display. She started to change the way that JonBenet dressed. She started to change the way that JonBenet looked intentionally. There must have been, for Patsy to lie about this, and it's so insignificant, there must have been some reason, or maybe some possible pushback or blowback that they thought they may receive from doing something like this. I don't know what that could be. Maybe pageants weren't accepted in the South like that, or maybe pageants weren't accepted like that in America, and they knew that maybe it could have been, you know, frowned upon in some circles. And so maybe you don't know why I'm dyeing my kid's hair. It may be a little weird, because honestly, you could dye a child's hair and just be like, oh man, she wanted this wacky blue hair, so, you know, we just gave it to her. She's going to wear it for a couple of days. It's washout dye. You know, she's going to wear it for a couple of days and then we're going to go on about our business. However, if there was a conversation about the seriousness of this dye, as in this is not washout dye that, you know, she put in her hair for a party. You know, this is actual permanent dye. You know, so we bleached her hair and it's going to be permanent and we're going to keep bleaching her hair. That might signal to somebody. And I think if you click on this interview, you can go and you can click on this interview and it'll show in its entirety how Judith asked Nidra, like, because Judith was like, yo, I had to really kind of, you know, skate around the truth a little bit, or I had to kind of ask the question in a way to where it wasn't alerting to Nidra, because I think Nidra was there. She said, I had to kind of ask the question in a way that they didn't get offended at me for asking. But I was just kind of saying, okay, what if JonBenet doesn't want to do this stuff anymore? But what if she wants to just be a normal kid and do whatever? And essentially Nidra was saying, I mean, we'll just basically tell JonBenet, that's it. You can't, this is what we're doing. You'll understand later, but this is what we're doing, period. You know? And so in order to, I think Patsy, in order to stay away from that kind of conversation and, well, don't you think you're making your kid? Maybe don't you think your motherhood would be questioned by us wondering why you're forcing your child to do this? In order for Patsy to stay away from that conversation, then they have to kind of tell people like Judith, or keep Judith from asking questions like, oh, you know, it's nothing. The son did it. It happened naturally and all such as that. But it's like, that's a good question, because let's take ourselves away from the pineapple for a second. Let's take ourselves away from that. Let's take ourselves away from like basic things about this case that don't warrant lies. You see what I'm saying? Like, why are you lying about basic things like her hair? It kind of makes you wonder if you're telling the truth about certain things or not. If you can lie about dyeing this girl's hair, what else are you lying about? Unnecessarily. Yo, how did this pineapple get here? Oh, you know, the pineapple, the simple response is the pineapple was there earlier from lunch. We had a bunch of kids actually come over and play. Had a bunch of kids come over and play, and they were hungry, and we just sat down and ate pineapple. Done. That's done. That's it. That's so easy to think about. Like, that comes to your mind immediately. Like, yo, if that's what really happened, if she really ate the pineapples, or if Burke really had pineapples earlier in the day, that comes to mind immediately. Oh, I mean, we had something to eat earlier. The kids came over, and Patsy mentioned in the interviews that she got pineapples. She got kind of like the thing, like the chunks from Safeway is what she used to do. She got the little chunks in the little thing from Safeway. I think she's talking about the big one, the big pineapple chunks from Safeway, and you could have just said, oh yeah, I always get the pineapple chunks from Safeway. And I just feed them to the kids. The Kobe kids came over. I fed them to the kids, and, you know, Burke had some, or JonBenet had some, or one of the kids had some, and they just left it on the table. It was a wayward bowl that I forgot to pick up, and that's it. But the fact that they chose to make up or tell another story rather than just saying some kid had it. But the fact that they chose to say, actually, I don't know where that bowl came from. It's in your house. How do you not know where it came from? It's in your house. If it came from somebody eating earlier, then just say that. But you giving me trouble about this bowl of pineapple is the same kind of trouble that you gave me about why you dyed her hair. So we see a pattern. When there's something that you think that you guys think might be shady, things, you don't just tell me outright what happened. Things tend to get murky. Things tend to become more confusing to where you tell me so many things to where I'm like, I can't make heads or tails. The problem is, this is the problem. The problem is, when you're talking to the cops, you're not talking to Judith Phillips. You're talking to the cops. The cops like Lou Smith are like, John, we need an answer for this. People are going to ask. Detectives are going to ask. We need an answer for this. What's the answer? And you just say, I don't know. And you trail off into nonsense. Judith Phillips, you can get away with that. Because Judith is not invested like that. I don't care. Like, I know it's a lie. Judith is like, I know it's a lie. It's not a big deal. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna press the issue. And some people would. But Judith is like, I'm not gonna press the issue. It's not a big deal. She said the son bleached her hair. That's it. We know better. So, I saw these elegant outfits, and JonBenet had this incredible, beautiful white dress on, and then they applied makeup and they photographed her, and it was obvious to me that this was a little girl that had changed a lot that I didn't know. No, I didn't see the stress of JonBenet at all. What I saw in that photo shoot was really the last time, I know the second to last time I saw her alive, was that Patsy was in a frenzy, that she was late as usual, and she probably had another appointment that she was already late for. So it was, come on, she was real tense. And the kids were like real stiff and real obedient to her. They knew not to cross a certain line. And then when I took the pictures, especially of JonBenet alone, I allowed her to be free and to and be herself on some level. It was quite difficult for her to handle that. I remember I had to talk to her, encourage her not to be, quote, on, I wanted a deeper picture. So Patsy comes in there and she's like, let's get this done. Let's hurry up. Let's get this going on. This is from Judith's perspective. So now Judith is telling us about what actually happened. So Patsy is like, oh, Judith wanted us to do some sort of bull crap photo shoot and this and that and the third. But Judith is actually telling us what happened in the photo shoot. They came in. I didn't tell them how to dress. They came in dressed like they wanted to dress, how they felt comfortable, over the top. But Patsy came in with an attitude on her Nidra type stuff, on her Nidra attitude. Don't cross me. You do what I tell you to do. Patsy can show everybody, oh, blah, 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 blah. I'm this nice, spontaneous, happy, this and that, third. And she is. But just like we say, why does Patsy, like we asked before, why does Patsy resonate so much with the two people in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie? And this is why. Because on one hand, I do resonate with this spontaneous, with the spontaneous character, Miss Jean Brodie. I resonate with that. However, there is some Nidra in me from my mom. Her mom probably treated her like that and had her on speaker. I had her on a very strict regimen. Patsy was on a very strict regimen. You can see through Patsy's pictures in high school all the way up that Patsy was on this team. She was on this team. She was on the drill team. She was on this speech team. She was on this debate team. She was going national. She was trying to go international a little bit, or she was local and then trying to go national. And so it's just like Patsy, to get scholarships and to get ready for college and stuff like that. But Patsy was like very well groomed for the spotlight. And it's kind of the same thing for JonBenet. I am trying to groom you for the spotlight. And so you're going to have to listen to what I tell you. I know what it takes to be Miss West Virginia, but we want to take you to be Miss America. Talking the circuit this is what was going on. Right? And so Patsy has to be a little bit stern. And if Nidra's there, Nidra is looking at Patsy and saying, get him in line. Patsy, you know what to do. Get him in line. Tell him what to do, Patsy. Tell him what they need to do. Tell JonBenet where to go. Put JonBenet where you want her. Put Burke where you want him. Tell him where to go. These are your kids, Patsy. And Patsy's like, I know, Mom. All right. This is where I'm going to, all right, JonBenet, you stand here. Do not move. Patsy would have been lighter. Without Nidra, Patsy would have just been lighter. She probably wouldn't have done all that. But because Nidra is like reinforcing, all right, JonBenet, stand here. Burke, you stand right here. Mom, are you fine right there? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good right here. And Nidra takes pride in knowing that she has this kind of influence over her daughter. That is my seed. She knows how to act, and she is doing it, and she is raising her children like that. So that Nidra will be prideful and be able to say, when JonBenet grows up or when Burke grows up, I washed your stinky bottom when you were growing up as a child. And I told your mom to do this, that, and the third to raise you. I am your grandmother. So I know a little bit about how to raise a child. And through your mom, I essentially raised you, because your mom, where do you think your mom got her parenting style? Your mom got her parenting style from me. So I raised you. Nidra would take pride in that, because she wants people to know that she is the matriarch. You got to know that. And so that kind of dichotomy of Patsy is coming out, and it's coming out here. And the feminist, the one who wants freedom, is in the room. The one who wants women empowerment is in the room, and she says she automatically sees some sort of oppression going on JonBenet, and she wants to alleviate the stress and the oppression from JonBenet by simply saying, because that's what Judith is going to do everywhere she goes. She's going to come and say, I see oppression. That's my mindset. I see beauty. I see creativity. I want JonBenet. I just want your creativity to flow. I just want your beauty to flow. I don't have any limits. I don't have any procedures. I don't have any rules or statutes. I just want you to be who you are, period. That's what she's going to tell JonBenet. And that's what she's telling us here now. I wanted to get the real JonBenet, not who Patsy wants me to see, not the pageantry, not the ball gown. I know JonBenet before this. JonBenet is a tomboy. I know JonBenet before this. I've watched JonBenet play with my daughter. I know her before this. And so that's the JonBenet I want to see. I want to see the fun JonBenet in these pictures. So she goes on to say, and this is, they talk a little bit about Roxy Walker. Roxy Walker helped among other things, in the death of innocence. Roxy Walker helped plan. Apparently, Fleet had set up a memorial at the church for JonBenet that did not include John and Patsy. John and Patsy came up, and Susan Stein, and then Roxy Walker came over. They were like, "Oh, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna set up something for JonBenet. F y'all, get out of here." Blah blah blah. And so when they were making up the program, they asked for, contribution from John and contribution from Patsy. We just want your words. We're going to put them in there. And that's where the whole thing, I think the and hence came in. And then Patsy was like, oh, you guys are, kind of nailing me to the cross. The media and the population is nailing me to the cross for saying and hence, because Patsy is saying that, it came from that sort of liturgical program where Roxy Walker and Susan Stein put that in the program, and so it just kind of blew up as something that was said in the ransom note. And so that's kind of a little bit of a background on Roxy Walker being involved as kind of like a friend to Patsy. So Roxy Walker, Judith Phillips says, Roxy Walker and her husband Stuart Walker called us. They knew. And so she's asking, were they neighbors? And so JP says they were neighbors that lived across the street. They were very close friends of Patsy. That's true. And John. And they wanted to let us know that we were about to embark on what we were about to embark on when we came back to town. Boy, I tell you what, Had Patsy knew that Roxy was talking to JP, talking to Judith Phillips, that may have been a problem. I'm not going to lie. But it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because what we see here is that you have a friend group, and I wanted to know how that sort of the fractures and how the definition or the line that Patsy and John said, how does that affect the friends? Do the friends just simply up and stop talking to each other? Or do they kind of communicate on the backside and say, you know, John and Patsy are doing this. This is what we should do. Judith referred to Fleet and Priscilla White's letter, and she was in support of it when she wrote her letter. So, you know, they were probably talking a little bit on the back end. She probably called them for moral support and say, you know what, I want to write this letter. What do you guys think? But here we see that Judith is telling us that on the back end, this person, this Roxy Walker person who is close with John and Patsy, who is still in the inner circle, is calling outside of the inner circle to somebody who is no longer in the inner circle and saying, hey, look, when you get back here, you might have some problems. When you come back in town, you might have some problems. And they found us in Chicago at my twin sister's house and talked to my ex-husband, Robert. And when they got off the phone, his face was completely white. I kept saying, what's the matter? What's the matter? What's going on? And he said, there's been a tragedy. And I said, what? He said, JonBenet. I said, what? He said, JonBenet has been murdered. You know, all these things flash through your mind, disbelief and horror and depression. And you want to reach out. And so I'm in Chicago, essentially, and I find out that JonBenet is dead. So did you connect with him? Did you talk with him at all? Judith Phillips says we tried, but they wouldn't answer their door. And I left a lot of messages. And I think Fleet called my ex-husband Robert back because Robert, we decided that if there was room on the plane to go to Atlanta, that one of the two of us would go to the funeral. And so Fleet did call back and talk to Robert, and we found that there was absolutely no room on the plane left anywhere. So we were more or less, they took off the next morning for Atlanta, and we were in Boulder. We were here in Boulder wondering. So JP wasn't at the funeral, but Patsy is saying that Judith Phillips just popped up out of nowhere after 3 months. No call, no show, no text, didn't want to talk to us, But Judith is saying, no, man, I've been trying to call you. I've been trying to hit your line. You know what I mean? I've been trying to call you. Left a lot of messages, actually. Maybe you didn't get the messages. Maybe because you weren't at home. Didn't answer the door. Maybe because they weren't at home. They went out of town and came back and they went to Pastor Jay's house. So I couldn't reach you. Just a little bit of a misunderstanding. So you think that Judith just abandoned you and left, and it's like, no, I mean, I was calling you. I thought that you guys would come back home. You didn't. And so therefore, I mean, we did what we can do. We tried to come. There was no room on the plane, so we didn't go. Okay. Trying to get Chicago to Atlanta to try to support you. We found out that it was, and so here again, we see reaching out to Fleet, talking to Fleet. We're talking within the friend group, trying to figure out what's going on. And we come in contact with Fleet. Fleet says, hey, man, here's where the funeral's going to be. We're trying to make it there, but we just can't. So when did you first speak to the police? Judith says, I think in April, not sure, March or April, and said, and did you ask to be spoken to, or did they tell you, did they take it upon themselves to kind of reach out to you? And so Judith Phillips says they called me first and asked if I would be okay if they could interview me down at the police headquarters. And I said, sure. Interviewer says, did they know more about what type of person Patsy was? And JP says, or did they want to know what type of person Patsy was? Judith says, well, they interviewed me 3 times. The first was short. Steve Thomason was short, and Steve Thomason Gosage was there. And there was a woman whose name I don't recall. Those were the 3 that interviewed me. May have been Lynn Arndt. No. It might not have been Lynn Arndt. I can't remember the lady's name. Man, I can't remember the lady's name. It was taped, and I didn't have any problem with that at all. They asked odd questions like, do you know this person as related to John Ramsey? They were naming off at least half a dozen female names. And no, I never heard of that person before. And no, I never knew that person before. And they would ask. And oh, I see. This is where it kind of I see. Okay. So the interviewer says, not related as relatives, but the connection in terms of life. Who were they? Who they were? And so she says, JP says, yeah, women involved with John. They were hinting at an affair. I said, why did you ask me the names of these women? They said these women, and they said, well, it's believed that John Ramsey had quite a few affairs, not only in Atlanta but also here in Boulder. Uh, being going to check on the plane from 12 to 3, you know, being going to check on the plane from 12 to 3. I mean, 12 to 3 is a long time. 12 to 3 is a long time, brother. No, 12 to 3. 12 to 3 is a long time, brother. I don't know how long it takes to fill up a plane or check on the oil. You know, I would assume that you were pretty diligent in making sure. I'm speaking to John when I say this. I'm pretty sure John was pretty diligent in making sure that that plane was oiled and ready to go, making sure all the fluids were there, and making sure the tires were good and stuff like that. Honestly, that's just a phone call, you know. But if not, you know, go down there and check on it, and you know that might take you like an hour and a half to go down there, check the fuel, get it fueled up, you know. So, you know, you leave at about 12. You got 12, 1, 2, 3. It's 3 hours. You know, so you leave. It's probably about 10 minutes from you, 30 minutes from you, maybe. It's 30 minutes from you. 1:30, you get there. 1:30 to 2:30. I mean, no, I'm sorry. Leave about 12, 12:30 to 1:30. You're there for about an hour and a half. So about 2 o'clock, 30 minutes to get back home, 2:30, you know. So I'm giving you an hour and a half to have done all these things. And I think it's only going to take you an hour to check all of that, quite honestly. So 12 to 12:30, you know, you're there at 12:30, let's say an hour, you know, it takes you an hour to do all this stuff. 12:30, you get there, man, you're walking around, you're checking, you go straight back to the hangar, you're checking on stuff, man. It's full. It's full. Fuel is there. Let's check this oil. Oil looks great. We're checking all my this and that, my whatever. 30-minute walk around, you know, to get good. So it takes about an hour, man, just to kind of check on the plane. Correct me if I'm wrong. An hour. And so, you know, 12:30 and about an hour from there be about 1:30. So you got about, and then 30 minutes to get back to the crib, you know, be about 2 o'clock. So you got essentially, you have an hour that you're unaccounted for. You know what I mean? Now, there are people who have had extramarital affairs. I'm not speaking to the morality of extramarital affairs. I'm speaking to the time frame that you have to handle your business in sometimes. Sometimes, you know, you have a whole evening that you can go and do whatever you need to do. And sometimes you say, look, babe, I don't have a lot of time. I'm on my way to you and I'm going to be in and out. We're going to be quick. You got some time. Are you free? She responds, oh, yeah, I'm free. Come on through, daddy. Daddy comes through. Got about 15, 20, 30 minutes. You know what I mean? To handle your business. And I'm out the door back to the crib. Pleasantries, kiss, 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 blah, blah, blah. An hour, get back to the crib. You know, because things can get out of hand. Hour, get back to the crib. Blah, blah, blah. So, it's possible. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's possible, given time frames, that here and there, John is dipping and diving into something here and there, you know, doing a little something. So John has these apparent relationships. Don't know whether they're real or not. But they asked me if I knew about Patsy, if I saw anger, if I saw her lose her temper, and if I knew she had ever had any relationships here in Boulder, questions like that, personality types. And they asked like prior to the murder. And she said, no, this was after the murder. She, Susan Stein, and I were the only two from our baseball team to have arrived early. And she was sitting there on the bleachers. And I said very reluctantly, hi, Susan. And she tore me apart by saying, why would I want to talk to you? You sold the pictures to the tabloids. You better get yourself a good. And that was the time she said, you better get yourself a really good attorney. And she kept pointing her finger at me, repeats, you better get yourself a good attorney. Susan, maybe you should be quiet if you don't know what you're talking about. So anyways, I think we've kind of read this before. Oh, I didn't see this part. Kind of threatening, and says, yes, very threatening. We're going to come after you. I just laughed and I said, Susan, you don't know what you're talking about. And she said, oh, yes, I do. And she said, I do know what I'm talking about. It may take a couple like a year or two, but we're going to come after you and you better run and hide. Oh my God. Okay, Susan. And so, of course, by that time, there were other members of my softball team that were arriving. They overheard Susan. It was embarrassing. There were people all over the place. And finally, I said to Susan, I don't feel this is an appropriate place to discuss this. I'd be more happy to discuss this at my house later. I mean, let's do it. You know what I mean? So she said that was February or March. And she said, JP was like, March, right. And then when I read Jameson's website, okay. So this is Sue Bennett. Jameson is Sue Bennett, like we said. Sue Bennett was mentioned in the Death of Innocence by John. John seemed to have liked her enough to mention her in the John seemed to have mentioned her and said, oh, you need to go read her website. She's generally accurate and this, that, and the third. I always see a little bit of Susan Stein sticking her nose and stuff. She said, I read Jameson's website about that particular meeting. And so apparently Susan, and so then all of a sudden we know that John Ramsey, later on, they kind of made it seem like Jameson was this weird, like Susan Bennett was this weirdo that kept calling him. And so they had to change their number on her, even though that she was a Ramsey apologist. It makes me wonder now looking at what JP is saying, JP apparently got this report from Susan Stein. John made it seem like Susan Stein would jump up and get on the computer and just find out information. That's what he made it seem like. She would just jump up and she would just fall into these rooms and she would just explore and find all of these things. But from JP's angle, from Judith Phillips' angle, not only did Susan Stein possibly, and this is I'm sort of kind of alleging this now, or I'm just kind of saying this now, theorizing, I guess, maybe hypothesizing. Susan Stein didn't happen upon Jameson's website. She knew about the website and she was a contributor to the website. It's possible that she reached out to Jameson to say, hey, here, let me help you get your facts straight from what I know. I'm a Ramsey family friend. The Ramseys are hanging out with me right now. So it would seem that the Ramseys had a leak from inside the house, but a good leak, a leak that made them look good. And so through the blogs, in order to control public opinion, this was one of the ways that Susan Stein could help control public opinion very under the cover wise. This is consistent with Susan Stein. She's done this before. This is somebody that I can manipulate and I can show my full self to as Susan Stein. I can show myself as Susan Stein to this person, Jameson, because Jameson, Sue Bennett, would be honored to have insight into the Ramsey household. A first person insight into the Ramsey household through me. And Susan has to be a special character. She has to be a main character. She has to be a hero. We've seen that as she, opened the door for Fleet White, for John and Patsy's house for the party on the 23rd. And she spoke for Fleet. So Susan has to be on Front Street. And so Susan didn't happen. It's my estimation that Susan didn't happen upon this website. She knew about it. And she introduced John and Patsy to it to say, hey, look, this woman it was kind of like a way of saying this woman is, she's doing your guys' work to kind of, smooth out any of this nonsense going on in the media. She's our friend. Because I was like, why would Patsy and John just meet this random lady out of the blue? Because of Susan. Because Susan probably recommended that she seems like a nice lady. I've conversed with her back and forth. You guys should meet. It was probably Susan that recommended that meeting. And John and Patsy took it for the benefit of Susan. It was. And so Susan said that Judith Phillips is not a friend. Oh, just so you know, from inside the Ramsey circles, the Ramseys have cut off another friend, and it's going to be Judith Phillips. She is no longer our friend. So whatever she says, don't listen to her. Because she's lying. If she says anything, she's lying. Because she made it a point to go to Jameson and talk. Nobody would have known about that story because Jameson is not from Colorado. Jameson wouldn't have known that unless Susan Stein initiated a conversation to tell her, let me tell you about the latest stuff going on inside the Ramsey camp. It was pathetic. And this is Susan's way of controlling the media. Because she tried to do that with Charlie Brennan of the Rocky Mountain News. She tried to do that with him. Hey, great story on these two. April 25th, 2003. She tried to manipulate him, but he caught on and said, this is not Chief Beckner. But that's what she was trying to do. This is not innocent. What Susan Stein did with the cops was not innocent. She said, oh, it was just a little joke. It was nothing. No, it wasn't. You did this before with Jameson. Manipulate the media. And now you're going to a bigger platform to manipulate media on a bigger official platform because you were so bold to reach out to Steve Thomas and try to speak as Chief Beckner to Steve Thomas. You're flirting with this there's a little bit of risk there. I'll cause trouble. And so that's why there's an adversity to the police, because she knows she does some stuff to the police or she does some stuff to get in trouble. So when the cops come around, she doesn't want to open the door. She's like, oh, I don't want you to see me doing. She operates in the dark. Oh, I don't want you to see what I'm doing. I don't want you to see this because I'm doing stuff that I know I should not be doing. So if the cops come through, Susan don't like the cops in general at all. Because of this. If the cops come through, y'all are going to see that I'm doing some shady stuff, some stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing. Behind your back, I'm smiling in your face, Patsy and John, but behind your back, I'm going and reporting your business to this website. And so then the website can say, oh, this lady got the facts generally correct because of Susan. Because Susan was telling her. It was the fact that she accused me of coming to the meeting drunk that I constantly pressured Patsy into signing a model release for the photographs Why would I do that when I had a copyright of the photographs in the first place? My behavior towards Patsy afterwards, it was just one lie after another. And she was just spewing her venom to Jameson. And it was, when I read it, it really bothered me. So I really try to stay away from those kinds of websites. They're so full. They're so full pack of lies, and there's so much hatred and rage coming from Susan Stein. That's it. All she wanted to do is hurt. That's it. All she wanted to do is hurt. That's interesting. See, if you listen to John and Patsy, if you allow John and Patsy to just navigate you through this case, you will think that everybody is the worst. Everybody is out to get them, this and that. But there's this old saying, and it's like in terms of relationships, or this mindset, I should say. Sometimes when people accuse you of cheating, like vigorously accuse you of cheating, and it's like, yo, I'm not cheating at all. What's going on? And they're on you. You better not. And you better not. It's probably usually likely that it's their conscience that is driving them, because they know what they're doing. They can see what you're doing and all the ways that it might look like you're cheating, because those are all of the ways that they would cheat and or are engaged in cheating. Apply that to the Ramseys. I can see all of the ways in which the media is shaping up a story, or things are being shaped up in the media, because that's what I'm trying to do. So if I see you doing something, I look up and say, well, dang, she made it to TV before me. That's where I was going to go. I was going to go on TV. But now I got to speak, and I have to have an internal dialogue within myself and say, but I was going to go on TV for a good purpose, for a good reason. Not what she's doing. She's a liar. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But for me, I was going to go on TV to spread the truth. Very interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. I didn't know Susan Stein was that involved. All right, Susan. You got some stuff up your sleeve. Now, I knew Susan was shady. I knew it. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Appreciate you watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment. You know the deal. You know how it is. Be kind to one another in the comments, please. I enjoy seeing you guys sort of comment under each other's posts, and just kind of in agreement, whether or not you don't have to agree. But just I like kind of going around and seeing the conversations that are taking place and stuff like that. So that's always cool. And, having your own train of thought and kind of, conversating about that. So that's always cool. Like I said, always be respectful, always be kind, and stuff like that. But like I said, like, share, subscribe. And for those of you who have been doing that, thank you for doing that. I always appreciate that. I always appreciate the support. So until next time, continue to take care of yourself, continue to look out for yourself. And until next time, take it easy.